Every workplace I had a bad gender pay gap. I'm in a workplace too. F*** off. Oh, hello. It's you again. Welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name's Alina and I am a freelancer slash writer slash YouTuber. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about the difference between working in an office environment and a freelance job, and be honest about the nuances of that. So if that sounds interesting to you, I hope you stick around. With my PCOS video, I did this thing where I just kind of wrote all of my notes, had them on my lap, and did a kind of podcasty thing. And a lot of you seem to like that. So that is what this video is going to be today. What I would like you to do is grab a nice cozy little blanket, maybe a cup of tea, and also maybe something to note down. One of these. Now, this is going to be my chart, freelance versus office rat, which is what I used to be. I was an office rat for 9 years in the rat race, and I'm going to be scoring them for me subjectively through lots of different categories that I've written down. And if you'd like to join in with me and kind of like look at your own life and see what you would score for what is better, freelance or office rat, I think it'd be quite interesting. You might be somebody who's in an office job and loving it. You might be in somebody who's in an office job and hating it and being really jealous of the freelancers. You might be a freelancer who realizes that actually there's some really bad points to being a freelancer too and feel jealous of the people in an office job. This is a space for us all to chat about the differences, what they might mean for your life and for mine, and how they can both be made a little bit better. This video is going to be so much more wholesome and successful if you also add your voice to the conversation. I can only speak from my experience and my specific job roles, but I would love to hear from you. If you're in an office, if you're not in an office, what do you love and hate about it? We're going to get into the categories, but before I get into those categories, I just want to say that I feel that there is this misconception. This is one of the reasons I wanted to make this video. There's a misconception that if you are a freelancer, if you do work for yourself, you have in some way escaped the rat race. You have hustled your way out of capitalism. You have stuck it to the man and you're now free to pursue things. And that's categorically not going to be the case unless systemic things change. As a freelancer, most of the time you are freelancing your labor to companies, and sometimes that can end up being more fair than working in an office, and it can sometimes end up being completely not as fair. During the pandemic, a lot of freelancers struggled. I lost a lot of freelance jobs because of the pandemic because I'd smart move. Rolled out loads of different jobs for myself over the spring and summer that were all event-based. They were all chairing things, running stuff for festivals, and a lot of that went under the bus. So I think it's going to be a really interesting landscape in the next 5 or 10 years, because I've seen lots of articles and stats about freelance work going up, and it's good to have these kind of honest conversations about the plus and minuses for your own life. So let's chat about how I left my office job during 2020, went freelance, and how I feel about all these different categories and whether it actually made any sense for me. Was this a good idea? I'm not sure. For those of you who don't know my work, just quick for context, here are a list of ways I make money. Patreon, AdSense, which is the adverts and stuff you see on this video, unless you use an ad blocker. I see you now. I freelance chair, so I will present people's podcasts or present at festivals and that kind of thing, interviewing other people who are more important than me. I've produced podcasts in the past before. I produced a vintage podcast. I produced this podcast called Mothership, which was really, really fun. I have done audio editing, video editing. I've done social media strategy, all of those kinds of things. And before that, and during that, I was working in the publishing industry in the UK. If you'd like to understand the different kinds of jobs I did in the publishing industry, I was in it for about 9 years, and there is a playlist somewhere up here where you can literally watch hours of me breaking that down if you'd like. But today we're going to focus on my current freelance life and the pluses and minuses that you might perceive to be there. Okay, category number 1. Let's grab Pastelina's video notes and see if they make any sense. Freedom, just generally freedom as a category, I think was going to be my first point, because I think there is freedom from and freedom to. And when we think about freelance, because it's got the word free in it, we think that that's going to be the more free option. But I think there's freedom from unpredictable income and also freedom to rearrange your day as you'd like, pick who you work with and that kind of thing. And I think there is actually a certain amount of freedom to working in an office, being in a PAYE job. Lots of those we're going to break down in the other sections, but on balance, for me, because of the freedoms I want, like for instance, I probably don't need maternity leave. I don't value the kind of freedoms that office work offers me. I value the freedoms that the freelance work offers me. For me, I feel more free as a freelancer, but that may not be the case for you. I also think the freedom to choose freelance is something that is incredibly nuanced and depends on your situation. Sometimes I think when people start off after uni or after like going into like the workforce, they think, oh, I need to choose between being a freelancer and working an office job. And for me, and for the reality of most people who don't come from incredible amounts of wealth, is that it's not a either or, it's a yes and then. Like, I had to work in an office job to be able to get enough resources, save enough money, and get the kind of skills, to be honest, to be able to freelance in the future. That is the only path for me. I don't look back at uni and be like, oh, I should have just been a freelancer from the beginning, because having the financial security, having a little emergency fund to float so you make sure you can still pay your rent and your bills, is like invaluable. And actually, like, I don't think most freelancers could do it without that little fund, depending on where you live and how much your living costs are. I personally usually have at least 3 to 6 months of those kind of minimum payments in the bank to make sure that I am secure enough to freelance. And I think there is a combination of luck and privilege that makes it possible for you to be able to do that. So for me, I am going to say, when it comes to freedom, freelance gets a point, because it lets me choose the things that feel most free to me. I feel like these categories should probably be more like ratlance and office rat, because we are all in the rat race still. That's the issue. It's not that you can't be not depending on the systems that are already there just because you're a freelancer. So for me, it gets a tick, but it might be different for you. The next category is cash flow. So with a PAYE job, with an office job, you have a contract where somebody has to give you a certain amount of money a month. It's great. I took it for granted for a long time. And also, what is actually coming into your bank is usually your money. You can spend it on your own personal expenses. You don't need to section that stuff off or categorize it. That has already been done for you. Usually you've already been taxed out of that. In the UK, your student loan comes out of that. Like, all of the admin and all of the time and all of the emotional labor around that is done for you, and you're guaranteed to have that for a certain amount of time. And there are employment laws to make sure that you get it. With freelance, cash flow can be way less predictable. There are certain times of the year that can be more bountiful for freelancers depending on what you work in. And you also don't have promises from people that money is coming in a lot of the time. You can do short contracts or retainers and that kind of thing, but generally the cash flow has to be managed in a much more nuanced way, which is why when I think sometimes I'll be talking to a friend who has like an inverted commas real job and they'll ask me how much I got paid for a job, and I'll be honest, and they'll be like, wow, that's loads of money. And I want to be like, yeah, it is, but it's also not what goes into my personal bank account by any stretch of the imagination. And I've written down some of the costs that freelancers usually have to cover that people who work in offices don't. I'm using people who work in offices, by the way, because if I then compared it to the jobs that I've had in retail and customer service and stuff, it would just add so many complicated layers to it. But for now, I'm saying office jobs, superficially synonymous with anybody who gets like a monthly wage and is like an employee, which I understand that loads of people don't work in offices who are employees. I'm simplifying it for the sake of this video, but I hope you know that I do understand that they are slightly different things. Hidden costs are of being a freelancer that aren't compensated for in the way that other people's are. So admin, just in general, I don't get paid for the time that it takes me to chase somebody to pay me. That includes creating invoices, going through various Sphinx-like maze portals of filling in loads of complicated forms so that a company can pay me, and also the logistics of sorting out a contract. I do all my own contracts for like brand work and stuff on this channel, and anything else. I do all that myself. I don't have like a manager or an agent, and that obviously takes like a lot of legal time and a lot of time to check and negotiate and sometimes write myself. That's all admin time that I am actually not paid for. Time off in general, you as a freelancer have to schedule your own time off and justify that financially. You don't get paid time off when you're not working, you're not earning. slow days in general, whether that's just for MH reasons, life reasons. Bodies don't work at the same capacity every single day. I get paid less if I work less and if I work slower, whereas in an office job I can kind of have a slow day and I still know that I'll get the same amount of money into my bank account at the end of the month. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Sick days in general, maternity leave is a big one. Heating, lighting, tools. You don't realise how much free coffee and tea and biscuits you eat in an office until you have to pay for them yourself and you're like, shit. And also just during the pandemic, there were obviously people started realising that actually to heat the house in the day, if you live in Britain, quite expensive. Really miss having a heated office to go to. So there's that as well, and internet costs, all of that kind of thing. Speculative meetings and just meetings in general, but I do a lot of like meetings with people that aren't paid, but like I might get work out of it at the end, or I'm like meeting and networking with people, composing pitch emails and that kind of thing. All of that speculative stuff I don't get paid for, whereas when I was in an office job I did get paid to do speculative work, to pitch to people, to see if we could collaborate with people, to go to meetings that may or may not be useful, let's find out, and all that was covered for me as an individual by the company. And also just tools in general. For me, I don't have anything too fancy, but these things do cost money and break intermittently. So all of that, usually if I was using tools and equipment in an office job, those things would be covered, and especially against like accidental breakage and stuff like that I wouldn't have to worry about any of that. Whereas in a freelance role, you have to worry about everything from your laptop to your internet connection. That's all your responsibility, and if it fucks up, it's coming out of your paycheck. All that to be said, I have to say when it comes to cash flow, office rats really win. In that scenario, you really win. However, the caveat comes with the fact that I am incredibly lucky to have a community of what other people would deem strangers, but I deem a community, some of them even friends, which is the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening through Patreon. And that means that my income is like that. I do have a certain amount of cash flow that is vaguely predictable. Obviously, everybody could overnight decide that they hate me and stop supporting me on Patreon, but because I think you spread the risk when like quite a lot of people are giving you a small amount of money rather than one big company is giving you all of your money, if that makes any sense. The next category is work environment. Now, when I say work environment, I don't mean like having a boss that makes you work, like lets you work from a cafe sometimes, or like those kind of flexi hours that don't always feel that flexible. But I mean more like all these different kinds of factors. So one of them is managing a workflow. I am a social extrovert and a work introvert. I very much thrive when I'm left alone to do one big project with some deep focus. And that's not always possible in an office environment, especially if you're working in a team. Now I'm a freelancer. If somebody does want to drop something last minute onto my plate, especially when it's like a boss who doesn't plan things very well in advance. I've had a lot of great bosses, but I've had a lot of bosses who, through their disorganization, have fucked up, and it's meant that I've had to do loads of unexpected work and my workflow has been fucked up because of them. If that happens to me in a freelance capacity, if somebody books something late or comes through late, they have to pay a late fee. Like they can't, or if they just want me to do a project out of the blue, they have to pay me for it, they have to pay me more. So there's loads of things like that I think like workflow is a lot fairer, because I can decide and protect my workflow and how much work I do or accept within a month. And if people do want to screw with that, I kind of to a certain extent can push back and get some justice. Either say no or say yes, but it'll cost you. I also get to just look after my human body a lot more as a freelancer. I jog usually like at like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, then have a shower before I have lunch, and I get up earlier, work earlier, and I can like move my day around my body rather than the body around my day. And a certain amount of discipline for your body is good, but I feel like when I was working in an office, I'd have to cram food in like before I left the house way earlier than I actually wanted to eat. I'd have to like speed eat some food like whenever I could break away from my desk, and it would take me a long time to get home, and I wouldn't actually be able to feed myself again till I was home at like 8 or 9 or 7 o'clock, and that doesn't seem to suit my body as much. I feel a lot happier and a lot healthier now that I can kind of regulate my own meal times, regulate my own exercise times, and because I'm not commuting, I get so much sleep. not to flex, but like, oh my god, It's so good. So there's lots of ways that I think like freelancers really have a better time with that kind of thing, and that's definitely something that I value a lot. There are definitely some downsides to being a freelancer. You don't have the emotional support, if you do get emotional support from your boss at work, to manage your workload. If you aren't coping well, you don't get the encouragement. You don't have like a yearly meeting where they tell you that you're doing well, or like the pats on the back for like insecurity and stuff. Like, it's kind of just down to me, and if I'm doing well, I have to congratulate myself, and if I'm not, I have to check in with myself and regulate my own kind of behavior, my own bossiness towards myself. And there's also like the element of isolation. Like, my partner Craig works from home as well, so I don't have an issue with that as much anymore. But I think there are like lots of ways that having a kind of crew around you, like a certain amount, like a social bubble that you're inserted into every day, just like you are with school, can be really, really beneficial. And that's something that I do kind of miss sometimes about the office, is having that kind of team to turn up to every day. Although I do have a lot of like chosen colleagues, so like people that do similar jobs to me that I Zoom with a lot, and like have little kind of faux work meetings where we compare like what our goals are and how our business is running, and like brainstorm how we can make it better. So that's something that is flexible depending, but there are definitely downsides to freelance. I was listening to this really interesting Sophia Bush interview of Brooke Davis fame, an icon, and she was talking about how toxic the work environment was on the set of One Tree Hill. And now she's a boss and she's a producer. She said that she wants to create a set where they can hold themselves to a degree of excellence as a challenge and not as a threat. And that quote like really blew my mind, because I was like, you're right. Like the plan of like having a workplace and doing work is obviously to earn money, but it's also to push yourself a little bit and to get that excellence out of yourself, whether that's being more efficient or if that's actually making what you're doing better. And I think the motivations for that are like really important, and trying to push yourself for excellence because it's a challenge, because it'd be cool to see if you could, rather than the threat of failure and like motivations of fear. Like, there's lots of research around why fear motivation isn't great and doesn't work and isn't sustainable. So I think that's really cool. And like, if I ever did have to create a workplace for other people, that's definitely a quote I'd probably hang on the wall. It reminded me of this kind of problem I've always had with HR departments. It's not usually ever like the head of department or like the people that are in my immediate vicinity. It's usually HR that have made me hand in my notice, because frankly they're gaslighty as shit, and companies pretend to have personalities, but they don't have like, if they did, they'd be abusive partners. Like the kind of like weird mental games that HR play with you, like, we're all friends here, but we're not going to pay you fairly, and we're going to forget everything you've ever said and pretend that you didn't say things. I won't go into it because I'll just get into trouble, but I've had appalling experiences with HR, and I think that's something that when you're a freelancer, you're so free to walk away from that kind of behavior in the workplace. I find workplace stuff really confusing because you kind of get to be yourself, but you also have to advocate for yourself all the time and kind of be on your guard. There's lots of like job interviews that I've gotten to where people are like, oh yeah, we work hard, we play hard, we stay, there's these things that are wrong, but we stay for the people. Like, it's all about the people. And I always find that hard, because obviously like I make friends with the people that I work with, and I'm still friends with loads of people that I met at work, but ultimately it's not a solid friendship group. You're not building as colleagues. You can't build a stable relationship because it's built on this third secret person in your lives, this company that can act erratically, sometimes even psychopathically, that you can't control, and you can have that trust ripped away from you at any moment. So one of you can get made redundant, you can get moved teams, and there's no real opportunity to make a long-term commitment to each other and build a working relationship that can last, while there is like a third person in the relationship screwing with you both and telling you both like lies, Anyway, let's not lay out all my workplace trauma, but I feel like while I've had some great workplaces, it really depends on which one you end up in. And for me, because I can walk away from anybody that I work with that isn't very polite or nice, like I just never work with them again. It's very simple. I don't need to go to a meeting about it. I'll usually do like one project with them or one event, and then I'm just like, well, that never needs to happen again. I'll go and pitch to somebody else, rather than having like stuck in a toxic work environment for 2 to 3 to 4 years before you can get out. So for me, lost my Sharpie. For me, freelance wins every time when it comes to that, but it really depends on your industry and the environment that you find yourself in, because I know a lot of people that have very healthy work environments, and that is fab. Protection in general, not the condom kind, steady. The next category is protection. Hands down, office job wins here, I've written in my notes. And I kind of have to agree with that. One big thing is due process. If you're in like a job role within a company and you do something wrong and somebody makes a complaint about you, there's usually due process. Like you have mediators, you have workplace rights, you have a union that can vouch on your behalf, and it's something that happens discreetly and in private. So you get a fair trial, hopefully, as is the theory, and it's not something that's broadcast to all of your friends and family. It shouldn't touch your personal life in any way, and you know, like while you're going through that process, it's something that you're innocent until proven guilty, and you're treated with a certain amount of respect, hopefully. Equally, if you make a little boo-boo, like you say the wrong number, you release the wrong press release with the wrong date on it or something like that, it's not you that is having a financial risk, it's the company that you work for. So for me, because I am a freelancer, if I don't have a company behind, like if I don't set up as a company and I say something that displeases a rich person or a company on the internet, they can literally like sue me for my goods, for the things that I own in my life, and if I was a homeowner, for my house. It was one of the reasons it is better to set up as a company if you have like a front-facing job, because that's like a real thing that has happened to people, and when you're acting on behalf of a company in a PAYE job, there is no risk of that, and that can happen even if you're behind the camera. Say if I took this camera and I went into an office environment and somebody tripped over a tripod, like if somebody wanted to sue, like it would be my neck on the line. Do you know what I mean? So there's so much protection for people who are in office jobs when it comes to like margins of error, and obviously you can protect yourself against that if you are a freelancer, but it takes more planning and more money to be able to like get insurance, protect yourself against that kind of thing, set up as a company, all of that kind of thing. There's obviously also, I think sometimes there's a myth that having a freelance job means that you have less of a work-life balance. I have not found that to be the case at all. I think that it really depends on what you had before, but for me, I had to do a lot of stuff outside of my office hours. I couldn't just leave my job behind and like shut the door at 5:30. I had to do a lot of reading. I had to be on social media sometimes because I was running social media campaigns. Like, anybody who's worked in maybe UK publishing would like laugh at the idea that if you have an office job, you can just leave it behind at the end of the day. I don't necessarily think that's right, but it is just the fact of things. So I felt like with freelance, for me, I have actually been able to walk away a lot more from jobs and like just shut the door and be like, okay, that's the end of my workday because I say so, and you've only paid me for these hours, so you actually can't contact me after that time. But I think that depends on how you're freelancing and who you're freelancing with. But I think that's something that's like a little bit of a weird one, where I think there's some misconceptions around that. However, because I am also a public facing person, there are times where I'm like, if I was an employee, I would be protected from this. So like people sending hate mail and horrible messages and harassing me, that's something that isn't allowed in a workplace. Like you actually get in trouble for that, hopefully, in 2022, the year of our Lord. And, I don't know, the other day I was like, I just had my wisdom teeth out. I had stitches hanging out of my mouth. I was in so much pain, and I was at a funeral, and I walked out of the church, opened my phone to text my mum, and I had like some horrible messages from people. And I was just like, if I was in a workplace, this would not be allowed. Like people wouldn't be allowed to harass you in this way. So that's like a weird thing. And that's one of my policies when it comes to the comment section. If I don't mind people disagreeing with me, because you're allowed to disagree with people at work, but at the end of the day, I am in my workplace. So when I chuck people out of the comments, it's because if I was my boss and if I was in an official workplace, I would delete those. I would chuck that person out of the office or out of the coffee shop or wherever I was working. They would be ejected from the shop, from the workplace. So I try and do the same for myself. Like if they're talking to me in a way that a boss wouldn't let you talk to somebody at work, then I'm like, I'm in a workplace too. Fuck off. So yeah, and I think also like there's obviously like some intrusive stuff. Like I went to the doctor the other day and somebody messaged me like, hope you had fun at the doctor, like a complete stranger who had just recognized me and then text me afterwards to say like, I saw you. I find that like incredibly inappropriate and creepy. And if that was like a male colleague in a workplace, that would be terrifying. He'd get in a lot of trouble. But because like that was just like a stranger on the internet, it was fine. Anyway, I don't mind people coming up to me like in person and saying hi if you recognize me in the street. I think that's actually really fucking fun. I love meeting new people. But it's only when people message me that that they're watching me or they've seen me and they didn't address me at the time. I find that like really uncomfortable and creepy. Like, please don't do that to people. What the hell? Full protection, Office Rat is getting a huge mark on the table. It's 2 all, but definitely in an office you get so much more legal and workplace protection. Pay and compensation. I always joke that I'm like, every workplace I had basically like had a bad gender pay gap, and they also, anyway, I won't even talk about it, but it was bad. And I joke now that I'm like, the way I solved that for myself after trying to fight it within the workplace was just to leave and create a workplace of one. And now there is no gender pay gap because the only person that works here is me, and I'm a woman and I get paid the most, you know? And I work with a video editor now, which is really, really great. And I pay him, but I pay him less because revenge of the genders. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I think the idea of like paying compensation, if you are in an empowering freelance network of people and you know what you're worth and what the normal rate is and you've done your research, then it's much more possible for you to get paid closer to the value you actually add to a project or to a thing. I know with a lot of workplaces, like people will be asked to take on more responsibility than is in their contract to prove themselves. And then only 2 years later, after much begging and meetings and HR gaslighting, they will get properly compensated for the work they were already doing. And that's not something that anybody could get away with if they were hiring a freelancer. You couldn't be like, could you do this job just to prove yourself? And if you do, then we'll pay you retrospectively if you do it again. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, you can't generate that kind of hideous underpayment for somebody. I think there is an issue there. I've seen that in all workplaces I've worked in, is where people are doing more than their pay grade, but they're only compensated later and not paid retrospectively for the work they've already done. So obviously as a freelancer, like, I would never do that. And nobody would ever ask me to do that. Like, that would be like a weird ask. So I think there's some balance there between like how we're treated as office workers and actually whether we say, well, you wouldn't do that to a freelancer, so why would you do that to me, you know? So that's always like an interesting one. And I also, with this idea of like adding value to a project, sometimes when you're getting better at a certain discipline, you're just getting better at it. You take the same amount of time to do something, but you produce a better thing. So I guess that works. But if sometimes the talent, the skill is to do something efficiently, to do something faster. But because our office places are based on like factories and like you clock in, you clock out, you do your 8 hours, it wasn't an incentive for me to become more efficient at things, to work faster, to produce more, because I was still going to get paid the same at the end of the day. And I think that's why sometimes a lot of people can become sluggish in office environments, because they're not allowed to leave early if they finish the work, you know? So I think sometimes that can be frustrating because there's little incentive to really get better at things, because you actually get paid less if you work faster for the work that you do. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. Right, Lena, keep your attention. You can do this. We'll get to the end of the video. So the final point for pay honestly has to go to freelance. In some ways, it's annoying because the cash flow can be frustrating and you don't always get paid. But I think when it comes to being paid fairly, you get to negotiate project to project, thing to thing, and that can offer a huge amount of financial freedom when it comes to being compensated fairly for the stuff that you do, for how good you are. You can tell that my concentration is waning because I've gone a bit Yorkshire. This is the final scores. What? Freelance wins for me, but only just about. I think that's really interesting. As somebody who advocates for freelance and loves being a freelancer, and if people like show interest in being a freelancer, I'm evangelical about it, and I'm like, if it's right for you, it's so much better. Like you got to explore it. Even with that hat on, it only got 1 more point, and I think that's really poignant. Oh my God, is that why they say poignant? Because of points. This video was made possible by the Gumption Club. They tip me per video, not only to make sure these videos keep happening, but so that I can get a decent cash flow through and I know how much money I've got so I can eat and keep the lights on and pay the nice man to edit this so I don't have to get body dysmorphia and look at my face all day. Isn't that nice of them? I love it. If you are a freelancer, please tell me the pluses and minuses you have found in your freelance life. If they're similar to mine, if they're different to mine. I'm aware that this is my circumstance, my personality, my financial thing, my geographical location. It's all very specific to me. So I'd love for you to open up this discussion and tell me your experiences in the comments below. If you're an office worker, have you ever dreamed of freelance? Do you ever feel jealous of freelancers? Do you feel sorry for freelancers? And like, do you enjoy your office job? Do you think people should be paid more? Ultimately, I think that the message here is that we can improve workplace rights and treatment for both. Like, we both need more. And I think there are solutions like stuff like maybe universal basic income that can encourage that kind of excellence without the fear, and also just generally more awareness and open literacy around how much work should be paid and who should get a cut of it. Can we really call companies in profit if they're ripping off and like underpaying all their employees? I don't really see that as profit. I think that's some bad book balancing. But without me completely getting on my soapbox at the end, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I reckon you might like some of these. I'm going to leave some links in the description to other videos I've made about being freelance if you have any questions, and also about my publishing career in offices down there in the description if you're interested. Thank you so much for watching. Frogs Nog out.